Shows are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Welcome to the EDventUres in Tech podcast. Talking the latest tips and trends in educational technology to innovate and engage your students. Here are your hosts, Andrew and Dan.
Back and more excited than ever. This is episode 51 of the EDventUres in Tech podcast. I am Andrew.
And I am Dan.
And we are very excited you've joined this venture with us. It is back live at NICEgate 2023. And but I know we have been talking about AI in our last every episode feels like it's really talking about AI. But before we get any further, we are live on the exhibit hall floor, and we had, I know we kind of referenced our guest speaker in our last episode, but we're going to have Dr. Michael Jabbour here. He's the Microsoft Education Chief Innovation Officer. He gave an incredibly powerful keynote last night on the empowering the future of learning. And I just want to say, Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here, and I appreciate you being there last night.
It was phenomenal. So just to give people a little overview of what the keynote was about is we're talking about the transformative world of artificial intelligence, from its fundamentals to its uncharted propensity to hallucinate, which I thought was so mind-boggling. We're learning how AI can revolutionize education, enhancing teaching and learning experiences with cutting-edge tools and personalized methodologies. We were diving into the potential of AI to automate routine tasks, stimulate collaborative learning, and foster educational journeys. And we were getting equipped as educators with practical use cases, which we're going to talk about, and the insights on seamlessly integrating AI into your classroom to institution and pave the way for the future where education is intuitively tailored, engaging, and impactful. Did I give a good overview there?
That was unbelievable. I'm going to have to get a copy of this recording.
All right. I'll give you the recording and you share the presentation with us.
All right. It's all yours.
So I don't even know where to begin because, Michael, it was such an eye-opening keynote with the personal story you told me about the health with your father. I lost my father recently with heart issues as well, so really tugged the heartstrings.
Sorry.
And then the other thing, just with the efficiency, with the schedule, I was completely invigorated and mind blown. Sorry I took up all your time, Dan.
No problem. I know I want to get to Michael to speak about different things, but one of the things that I'd like you to talk about is one of the things that really, and Andrew brought it up, that really resonated with me in your presentation, that really got me to think about AI and the power of it, is when you brought up the point that it can hallucinate with incredible confidence. Can you talk about, when you said that, what that quote means and what you were talking about with AI?
Yeah, absolutely. Its hallucination capabilities are a feature. They're not a bug.
Right.
And it's connected to its ability to create, very much like the human brain creates. If I asked you to relate a sticker, for example, to your shoe, your mind will naturally form connections that don't exist and probably shouldn't exist. But you might think about things like, well, this sticker could be put on the shoe. Someone was wearing shoes when they made the sticker. But the ability to create is deeply embedded in that ability to hallucinate. So now what we are seeing is hallucinations can be curtailed just like they can be curtailed in a human. And when I think the difference with AI is that when it does hallucinate and it does loop, it does so with exceptional confidence. And so I can ask it to explain why it diagnosed a patient in a particular way, and it will provide unbelievable, almost undeniable explanations. It'll compare diagnosis options. I'll ask it straight out, are you hallucinating? It'll say no.
Wow.
I think even from the very earliest forms of GPT, one of the capabilities that it had was the ability to manipulate humans. And that's combined with hallucinations, probably a little bit of a scary thing.
Wow. Yeah. The hallucination thing, a lot of people are probably like, what are you really talking about? And I think there's a lot of our listeners and a lot of teachers and educators, actually I think the general public is also still trying to figure out AI. So sure, they may have an Alexa or Google or whatever device they have at home, but they don't know that they've been exposed to AI like smart compose emails and finishing your sentences, and every little thing that you're doing, AI is trying to make things more efficient for you, right? So when you see in education, do you see a lot of the districts adopting this, or how are they going to, they got to catch on, but it's like, is it going to be sooner or later?
Yeah, so, as we mentioned last night, if you've used a calculator, you've used AI.
Right.
It's the ability to train a computer to do a task that a human would otherwise do. Now, there are other forms of AI that you might be more familiar with, like you described. Those are more machine learning and varying on deep learning. So the way that you can think about that is a great predictor at scale. Generative AI is the ability to create new. And so, yes, you'll see hallucinations in content, you'll see them in images, but you wouldn't be able to create the beautiful artwork that you see AI create without that capability. I think when it comes down to teachers being able to teach, as long as humans stay in the loop, they're going to find that their ability to teach is going to be substantially improved, because they're going to be able to access almost every person in their class, whereas before they could only access a small portion of the group.
Right.
People need content in their language, in their culture, at their level. And we're not yet at the place where every student has a co-pilot, but we will be there one day.
Yeah. And if you had to predict what's the timeline for us to be there, as you said, to get to those students to be there one day? Like, are we talking, I look at how much transformative AI has been in the last year, but is it 2 years out? Is it 5 years out? Like, what would you think?
Definitely not 5 years. I think it's safe to say years, because we want to make sure that it's safe and effective.
Sure.
It's not months necessarily. So I would say between 1 and 3 years is probably a good estimate of. But along that entire time, you're going to still see tasks being handed off to AI.
Right.
Like evaluating policies, being able to talk to documents. Even Sam Altman has said in the past that you're going to wake up one day, all of your emails are going to have pre-drafted responses when you wake up in your language.
Wow. That's mind-blowing.
So we have the technology to do that now, today. That's not a year from now.
Yeah.
Right? It's your voice. And I know a lot of times we think of our voice as being digital or just inside of audio, but it's much more substantive than that. It will be broadly your voice, how you speak, what you say, what is written, how it's written. So I believe that a lot of that is going to proliferate in the very, very near future. And for a student, we're trying to make the tools available as quickly as we can, starting with higher ed and kind of working our way down the chain.
Sure. Yeah, because it's going to impact them most as they start preparing for their careers.
That's right. A different career than they probably were going to have a year ago.
Who knows the career?
4 years ago, they had one idea.
That's right.
One of the things why I brought up that whole idea of like the hallucination, because as you went to go and explain it, it gave me a key insight of how it's, really thinking about the information and the creativity, and to tie it back to teaching and instruction. No matter how creative and engaging a teacher is, so often we're working in silos or maybe with a small group, and you can't think of all the possibilities. And having something to, even though it may be a hallucination but the fact that the AI can be that possibility generator. So you talked about angular momentum in a toilet bowl. I'd love to have you share that little story, because I'd like to build upon that a little bit more.
Yeah. It's a great story.
It is a great story.
It happened live in a demo. And so already we're concerned about how demos go.
Yeah.
So no one ever wants to be in a demo with me, that's for sure.
I do.
But I think that was a great example of having completely random objects and trying to teach something, because that was what the crowd came up with. That's what's so interesting to me. They came up with those topics because they wanted to learn about those topics, and they wanted to give an object that would help them remember and help them connect. So when I was in my medical program, I had to make that stuff up all the time. I had to make up acronyms. I had to force my brain to remember things in ways that were very unnatural. And I'm talking about whether it was a pharmaceutical name or it was a particular pathology. I had to change my mind in order to connect to that material. And here, the material can change, to connect with my mind. And I think that's the most amazing part of this. And then you can build skills from there. Now, doing it safely is important. Doing it responsibly is critical. So as we start to look at hallucinations and how they're used and in kind of these creative teaching scenarios, we want to make sure that humans stay in the loop. We want to make sure that we're not doing things that are going to cause, any kind of further bias or stereotyping. But this is a part of what we call responsible AI at Microsoft. It's not just how you build, but how you use.
Right. Go ahead, Dan. No, go ahead.
No, I mean, and that is amazing and fantastic, and just bringing up the human component to everything that goes in behind it. So, I was thinking about your talk about how the AI helped you make the angular momentum in the toilet. It made me think of, when you're sitting there with your students and you want to provide the best learning environment for your students, and you can follow the principles of UDL, Universal Design for Learning, multiple means of representation, multiple means of, and we were sitting there and we gave a presentation on AI yesterday.
Not as good as yours.
Not as good as yours, but
I still would love to hear it.
Talking about that, but it was one of those things that I was preparing for the presentation, and I didn't realize it because it made me think of exactly what you said. I was preparing for the presentation now. We put in this RFP almost a year ago, like before AI was even
May and June.
So what our original intention was completely different from what we presented on yesterday. But I used the chatbot to this is my audience, these are my overall goals, this is how I would like to do it, how can I demonstrate, and it told me, and basically that using creative stories. So I put in an earth science standard, and I put in this, and I said I would like this to be told in an engaging way that will reach this type of audience for this specific purpose, and it created me a story about a water droplet named Aqua who had this incredible adventure like Indiana Jones that tied in every aspect of the standard, and it created this story that I can then put in and then get some closed reads to it, some other formative assessments that took the standard and the story and melded them together. I couldn't do that on my own.
Well, I'm going to give you 2 tricks that you can add to your story.
Oh, please,
Right?
please.
So
we heard it here first.
Number 1 is I would have it ask you 5 to 10 questions about how to make the story more empathetic and more relatable.
Building empathy, awesome.
Right? And then you'll give it a response, and it will retailer the story. And then what I would also do is tell it that you want more emotion about the drop and about how, bring out those emotive components of it. And then when you're in your prompt, tell it that this is really important to your career. And you will see it substantively improve in its ability to draft for you.
Oh my God, that's...
When you're doing the exercise, you can redo the exercise, and teach me angular momentum using a toilet bowl. Tell it to give you 5 ways to teach angular momentum using a toilet bowl.
I'm as soon as we're done, I'm trying it. But it's so resonating into when you brought up I wasn't thinking about empathy and using it, but it makes me think of when we're working with our teachers and we're collaborating, we're trying to build these experiences for students that are more we always want them to be creators and not consumers. And a lot of things we do in our classroom is we build up the capability of students to enter into the design thinking process in order to produce an authentic outcome. And empathy is such an important part of it. But now I'm thinking, because we have the students conduct interviews and get questions, which is still really important, but you can't, our students, maybe they could, but they couldn't interview you on a regular basis if you were their user or audience, but you can
unless it's his wife's school.
That's it. That's right. And it needs help with a spreadsheet. But using that, because it could take on the role of someone and give that perspective.
Yes, and you can absolutely generate those ideas from the classroom. You can have the students generate what they want to see, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and have AI build those stories that are meaningful for them in that moment.
Wow.
Particularly with processing, if there's something very difficult that they have to process, there are a lot of very challenging things that kids are exposed to now that they're not easy to teach, but they're even harder to absorb for a student. And so most teachers are not trained in trauma therapy. Most teachers are not trained to give over difficult news and difficult topics to children. And so being able to leverage AI to have new and innovative ways to do that are safe, it's going to change everything about education, because I think it's not just about content delivery.
Right.
Mm-hmm, no.
That's not what education is, and it's also not just about competencies. We are building humans that need to be not just work ready, but life ready.
Yeah.
And that starts at the earliest possible age. And I mentioned this last night about how people can get blocked very early and not know that they're even blocked. I took my son, I don't even understand a lot of the math that he's doing because it was taught in a completely different way.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, Papa, can you review my homework? And I'm like, no. So I try to the best of my ability, but then, I recently snapped an image of it on GPT Vision, and it not only did it solve the problems that he got wrong and indicate which ones were right, but it told me the skill he was missing that caused him to not be able to solve those problems.
Now,
There's so much there.
I know, but when it did that and it showed the skill, and then you kind of started to talk that through with your son, was it the way that he was taught in school? Probably not.
So I didn't ask it and follow through, but I think I could have asked it to study like the more modern ways to learn that type of math.
Right.
And it could have also looked at the math. You know what? I recall now that it was using the math approach on the paper to respond.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So I didn't look in detail in terms of how it was providing those solves, but it understood what he was doing and also why it was wrong. And then I asked him, his name is Daniel. So I was like, Daniel, did it solve it correctly now? And he said yes. So then, I didn't fully believe him. So I asked my 17-year-old, and he said it was true.
That's awesome. You brought up something, talking about content and teacher. Like, I think, teachers have been out of the content business for a while now. Like, we all came in, we're content experts. We had our passions. We had these things we love to teach about. But then we also, we love to be teachers. And we love to teach students and provide them with the best opportunities for success. And I think the teacher as role of content deliverer is long gone. That's been outdated forever, and we've talked about that forever. But you brought up something with our youngest learners, and I don't have the but I remember research, and I forget who it was. I think it may go back to Sir Ken Robinson and one of his talks that he gave, how there's such divergent thinkers when they're young, and those divergent thinking either gets shut down as they move through the traditional school process. And at this point, more than ever, we need to encourage divergent thinking, because we're preparing students for something that we don't know. We have no idea. We used to say that, but I think it's really there now. We have no idea what these students, but we know what they're going to need to be. Well, at least we can hope we know what they need to be able to do with their skills and going from there.
We definitely don't know a lot about what the future holds, but we do know that being able to promote that level of creativity is critical. When we're looking at this from a grading perspective, kids still have to do well in school, but it's very hard to force yourself into that structure and to conquer that structure while still maintaining your creativity. This will be one way that we're probably able to do that. Right? How do you give them the competency, give them the content, give them the skills, but at the same time have them expand? Being able to think about all the possibilities is something that even adults who are practiced in that area have a hard time doing. And so it's interesting, and I think one of the best branding that was done around in the Microsoft teams around Copilot, because I think it would have been a mistake to name it something like Autopilot, because that's not what it is, right? One of the, I've had the ability to drive some self-driving cars, and I realized from that experience what Copilot really is. The ability to hand off between the machine and the car is critical. It is what makes you a good Copilot driver or not. It's what enables you to use that kind of autopilot technology 95% of the time versus 5% of the time. And so being able to learn what Copilots are going to be, being able to build our own Copilots, that's going to be a part of the future. But I'm seeing schools that are even teaching students, or in graduate level, that are teaching students how to solve problems with prompts. They'll allow them to use the prompts that they create as like an open prompt test, and then letting them carry those prompts with them post, like as alum. And so we're going to start to be able to see these things as new tools. You're just like you saw kind of cursive, float away. We're going to see new things now float in.
Oh, for sure.
I'm interested here because I know a lot of our listeners, they always look at the ethics of AI.
Sure.
They're what are you doing? Why are you doing this? This is not right. Where's the ethical component? It's going to replace me. It's this, that. What are your thoughts of ethics in AI and education?
So our CEO, Satya, he started this journey in 2016 by creating a responsible AI standard, which is an excellent standard to know. It doesn't make you a responsible person, but at least gives you a scaffolding of what to think about. Minimizing stereotyping and bias, fit for purpose, human oversight, and privacy, inclusivity, security, various other areas. So my sense is that you start with a responsible AI framework. That's really the kind of the backbone of what ethical AI will be, and that's both in the construction of AI as well as in the use of AI. In terms of academic integrity and what is really ethical there, that there's a tremendous amount of gray area that has to be figured out. And and also taught to our kids in this kind of new form of digital citizenship. But you have to also ask yourselves that question. If your lawyer that you're paying hundreds of dollars an hour to wrote a document using AI that they checked, are you okay with that? Are you less okay if they cited it, or more okay? We have to figure out our perspectives on it. This is not a simple situation.
No.
Right? If you were writing a sympathy note to someone for they lost a parent, then you wouldn't necessarily want them to cite that they used AI to do that.
Right.
But I think that's a kind of a globally held, if we asked 1,000 people, they would all agree to that. If we asked 1,000 people, should they cite their work if they did it in an academic paper, they would agree.
Right.
But 90 other cases out of 100, they don't know. It's not even that they agree or don't agree, they just don't know yet. And so ethical AI, for Microsoft's standpoint, is really about building and deploying and using AI correctly.
Yeah.
But ethical and responsible AI, when it comes down to the end user, is going to be something that will be will evolve. Now, something interesting to think about AI, because it's changing so much, is that what we're trying to do is create things that have fixed nature to them. So that the AI ethical standards are fixed, the development platforms are fixed, the way we host them and train them are fixed, and that allows the AIs to be extraordinarily capable and variable. And so that's where you're going to see us focus.
That's great, because you're right, it is very subjective, right? And what everybody's, I don't want to say tolerance level, but what they feel is right versus wrong, and that's, everybody's inner circle, inner being is going to be able to determine what that is. Wow. So I want you to explain to the audience of, if you don't mind, about, the heart issue and how you would put that in. It was very personal to me, like I had mentioned, and just how AI is kind of being transformative in the medical field.
Sure. So I certainly will give it with the caveat that people should not be using this for medical uses at this point. However, you're going to see medical uses come out soon, both in the hospital systems as well as in the consumer space. When I first got access to GPT-4, I was most interested, and I was playing with different versions of GPT before that, and other AIs for that matter.
Right.
But my father's case is sort of an interesting one. He died about 3 decades ago, and he was having a heart attack, but he was misdiagnosed with pneumonia, and he was surrounded by 5 physicians when he died. So even if the instrumentation was off, even if something else was off, there were multiple people there that could have detected and didn't.
Right.
And by the time they figured it out, they couldn't resuscitate him. So it was a litigated case, and I just thought to myself, I wonder if GPT would understand the medical transcription. It has a low context window, so I had to kind of feed it in. But as I did feed it in, when I asked it for a diagnosis, it gave me the correct diagnosis and the correct workup instantly. And it made me wonder, as a person in medicine, if we are less than 10 years away from it being illegal for someone like me to give a diagnosis without a co-pilot. And what other professions, you think about, like law and teaching. Like, some teachers probably should not be teaching. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on the podcast, but
it's good.
And all good.
And so, my sense here is that it is going to augment us in really special ways. It is important to detect it, and in my case, yes, it did detect it correctly. And so, my sense here is that every person, every student deserves to have a teacher, an empathetic teacher that has infinite patience, and every person deserves to have the best possible healthcare in the world, best possible healthcare. And I think we're getting to that place where it's feasible that every person around the world can do that. And I was just mentioning this on the other conversation I was having with Alana, which is, 10 plus years ago when I was at the health department, we were studying cell phone use amongst those in poverty. Mm-hmm. And we found that it was ubiquitous. That smartphone use, even 10 plus years ago, was ubiquitous in the poverty and those in poverty. And I really do think that having a technology and a tool like this that's not on a laptop, that's accessible on a mobile device, that can be accessible by satellite or LTE or what have you, like, we have all the technology to deliver education and some elements of healthcare to every person. And I'm very excited for that future.
And
it's the greater good.
We're excited too, and we've taken up a lot of your time, and I think that's a fantastic way to end the conversation. But just to wrap it up for everyone, a year ago it wasn't on our minds, and through that year, for a lot of teachers and people, it went through a lot of panic, a lot of people being unsure. There still is, I think, a lot of panic, unsure and not where. But I think from your speech, everything we have here, every colleague that we presented and sat into, there is that sense of, maybe it's hope, but the fact that you can now get to the heart of providing. One thing that came, everything you're saying, like everything that it can do will provide opportunities for something else to build upon, to create another opportunity, And if that's something that we can embrace to create opportunities for whomever we're working with in whatever field, then I think we're doing well by the people that we're with.
Absolutely. Definitely gives us a new hope for what's coming in the future. Michael, thank you so much. So much.
Thank you for having me.
It was absolute pleasure. Once again, Michael Jabbour, the Microsoft Education Chief Innovation Officer. You heard it here first on the EDventUres in Tech. We thank you again. This is going to wrap up this episode, number 51. Thanks for the support on all the platforms. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, please reach out. Tech hard, work smart, live an adventure.
Find Andrew on all socials at @NicolaTech and Dan at WCSD Tech DR.